Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle from WeAreSC.com. We are in the dark days of football offseason. Recruiting is done and spring hasn't started. It's all NBA regular season and college basketball regular season. Well, not just that. We have American figure skaters falling all over the place, despite the fact that he's the best figure skater apparently who's ever lived. So it's dark, but we can see a light at the end of the tunnel. Spring ball is almost here. And so today we are going to start a little spring ball preview. We're going to start on the defensive side of the ball because, let's be honest, that's where all the interest is this offseason anyway. We have a pretty good idea what the offense is going to look like. The defense is what's new and what needs to improve. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk about a little bit of other stuff too. We're going to talk about some eligibility rule stuff that's going on in NCAA just a little bit because it's weird. And we're going to follow a message board suggestion that we start drafting an all-time team. At the end of this, we'll have 4 all-time teams, and you can tell us which of ours is best and which are terrible. Let's start with a spring ball preview, guys, and let's start on the defensive side of the ball. Like I said, I guess the first thing we should talk about a little bit is what Gary Patterson is looking for defensively, right? Because while USC played a lot of nickel last year, I think his 4-2-5 system is in some ways different than what Danton Lynn was running. I think we all hope so. What's the point of replacing him if you're going to do the same thing? And so I want to talk a little bit about that, maybe starting in the secondary, and then we can talk a little bit about returning guys, new guys, where we think they fit in, who needs to make a jump, and all that other stuff. We'll see how far we get today. There's a lot to talk about. We may wrap it up next week. I don't know. Let's start with this, though. USC's been running primarily nickel for quite a long time, and that's not unusual because almost everybody runs primarily nickel these days in the days of the spread offense. I think that Patterson's system might be a little bit different than what we're used to with the last 2 coaching staffs. The nickelback tended to be an extra corner on the field. Now, I know Kamari Ramsey played there last year because of injuries, but that wasn't the intent. And Ramsey was a guy who was a pretty good cover guy anyway, and so that's usually what happens. I don't know if that's what you see with Patterson's defense, and so I want to talk a little bit about his defense, and let's figure out what we think that probably means for USC's current personnel. Let me make the first point. You guys can jump in wherever you want. The first thing that's important to understand is that a lot of fans see a base nickel and they assume that, well, then his goal is to stop the passing game, but it may not be good against the running offenses of the Big Ten. I'm not sure that's right. I think Gary Patterson's theory is that he's going to stop the run with numbers. And his 4-2-5 defense is essentially the old 4-4 or 6-2. It's just, it depends where those outside guys line up exactly and what you call them. But they still have primary run responsibility. And so you're talking about the strong safety and the weak safety. The free safety is a different position entirely. Those guys pretty consistently have outside force. In other words, if the defense is going to bounce things to the outside, you hope you don't want to leave a hole inside. And Gary Patterson relies on those safeties to clean up in the run game. And because he runs a lot of robber coverage, he frees the free safety to often be a 9th man in the box. So if you look at what Gary Patterson talks about, he talks about the importance of stopping the run and how if you don't do that, you can't really accomplish anything defensively. And he doesn't do it by adding a bunch of bigger bodies to the game. He does it by trying to find a way to get 8 or 9 guys in the box. And to do that, he uses speed rather than size. So it's sort of an interesting approach. First of all, before we move on from there, guys, any other comments on that before we jump into what that might mean for our personnel?
Seems good. Handled it well. Great job.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. All right. So let's
Maybe
talk
you
about
should be
this.
the coach.
Well, I don't
Unlimited.
think I want that kind of pressure. And I'd be terrible. Let's talk about the three safety positions then, because USC has a bunch of young defensive backs, and I think that there are three sort of incumbents that you expect might get those starting spots. But let's talk about what that means. Let's start with a strong safety spot. In Gary Patterson's system, the secondary is broken into halves. You literally draw a line right through the center, and then you have a strong side, and then you have a weak side. The free safety goes to the free safety is responsible for the strong side and the calls on the strong side, and that's where the strong safety lines up. The weak side is where the weak safety lines up. You base strong or weak primarily on the offense's personnel. If they have two receivers to one side and one receiver to the other, strong side is to the two receiver side. Pretty simple. Okay. If you have two receivers to one side, you have a receiver and a tight end on the other, it's still the two receiver side, because you're basing your strength call in the secondary on the greatest receiving threat, and usually that means the more wideouts you have. Okay, that's the fundamentals. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's start with the strong safety who lines up on the strong side. The strong safety in Gary Patterson's defense is a hybrid linebacker safety. He often plays fairly close to the line of scrimmage, depending on what the offensive set is. And like I said, he has contained responsibility to his side against the run. The second thing is most of Gary Patterson's coverages do not involve the strong safety with deep responsibilities. He might sometimes, but usually not. Usually, the way it works is if the number one receiver, the farthest outside guy, if he goes vertical, which usually means get a route at least 8 yards deep, the corner locks up on him man to man most of the time. And if the number two receiver goes vertical, the free safety usually locks up on him man to man. And the strong safety then has flat coverages, and he has deep responsibility only if number three receiver goes through his zone and then deep. Okay, it's not that that's the way it always works, but that's the way it often works. What I think that means is the strong safety here is somebody who has to be able to cover and has to be able to run, but he's somebody who has to be effective in the run game, and he has to be able to keep contained. And it's probably going to be a guy, if you're lucky, who's sort of a physical, rugged guy, much more than a corner or maybe some of the other safety spots. Now, if I'm right on all that, and I've been talking too much, the first question for the group is, what does that mean for USC's personnel? Who's likely to find their way into that strong safety spot? The coaches, I don't think, have said anything about this, so we're speculating. But I think we can speculate, knowing the personnel that we have coming back. Who wants to jump in first on that? Who do we think is likely at that strong safety spot?
It's interesting listening to you describe both the strong safety and the nickel. It almost sounds like they're interchangeable spots. So, I'm wondering, you're asking who are the candidates? Is Alex Graham a type of candidate? Can he play that role? Kennedy Urlacher obviously comes to mind. So these are guys you can maybe switch around, maybe taking some Dan Lynn's philosophy where you have guys you can keep on the field, whether it's run or pass situations, and you just kind of move them around like chess pieces. So those would be the first two names. Obviously, Prophet Brown is another guy. Is he big enough to play, in the box as a strong safety? We know he was, the presumptive nickel starter last year. I think they have a lot of candidates. It's just a matter of who are they going to settle on. You talked about Kamari Ramsey playing nickel. He looked uncomfortable playing it though. So whoever they put there, again, are they going to be physical enough at that strong safety position to read the field and do what's necessary?
Good question. That's a good start. Who else wants to jump in on this? And any thoughts on who we're likely to see in that strong safety spot?
Yeah, I mean Christian Pierce, right, is the guy that I think you like the idea of bringing him a little bit closer to the line and not ranging deep. What I love about those two safeties is the idea that right, it's heels down and you're leaned forward at the snap. Like everything's play forward, everything is play up to the line, stop the run first, and then it's quick reaction, right? To be able to read pass and get back into your spots. But that kind, and you see like Iowa's safeties play this. You see a lot of this in the Big Ten where it's downhill first. I think with that strong spot, if you have to cover, tight ends or the extra receiver, I think Pierce has enough of that. Um, and I don't know that his strength is, deep coverage, deep middle, that sort of thing. So I think he's a guy that you bring up a little bit closer to the line.
Yeah. Greg, any thoughts on this?
Listening to you pontificate on the position situations in the secondary, I just wonder. I ask myself, how would I screwed up that secondary? Okay, how would I confuse them? Would I people in motion? Changing of a tight end from one side or a double tight end to the other side, and to really get some confusion on just who are we guarding. I'm sure that they've gone through this before, but that was my first thought was, well, I would sit there and have all sorts of motion, change stuff. I think the thing to keep in mind is no matter what they do, they're going to be facing quarterbacks that were accomplished quarterbacks from last season. And it's not going to be like Oregon's quarterback comes back, Ohio State's quarterback comes back. Indiana's has a great transfer coming in. And to me, those quarterbacks have the ability to try to figure this out. And let's face it, teams are going to have 4 games to look at the good teams. They have 4 games to see what SC does and how they react to it. And, SC will have more talent than the 4 teams they're going to play at the start of the season. But that doesn't mean that the teams that they are playing aren't going to have the idea of, we'll put people in motion, we'll try to screw up that secondary. And that's my curiosity. I think they'll find the best athletes to play, but who are the smartest players that will make the adjustments when the offenses start making the adjustments?
Yeah, no, it's a good point because when you're splitting the secondary into the strong side and the weak side, all it takes is one guy going in motion to change that. And that means that your strong safety is oftentimes going to end up playing in the weak safety spot, especially if teams want to pick on that strong safety, throwing the ball downfield, because that's the easiest way to set that up.
They're the
And
same
so
guy though, right? I mean, don't you need the same guy at those two spots? Because it's
yeah,
pre-snap motion, it's post-snap motion, right? It's split zone block. Like we saw so many times where the safety that's assigned to the tight end runs out of the run game because they're chasing the tight end across the field last year. Like you have to be able to set on both sides, and you need the same guy because, like what Greg said is right. Like you have so many ways to say, oh, you're the strong side linebacker. Not anymore. Like after the snap, now all of a sudden everything's going the other way. So yeah, you need. I mean, and that's where I think what we saw with Pearson Urlacher last year, like a lot of similarities. And so when you have a defense where you kind of need the same guy to play 2 spots, I think that's where some of this safety stuff you have now is helpful.
yeah. Well, and look, these are challenging positions. He puts corner in his system is not that complicated. It's not easy because, as we'll talk about, you often don't have free safety help, and you're playing man coverage. And so, if that brings back, I don't even want to say it. I'm going to.
Say it.
If that brings back memories of Alex Grinch's cover zero, where you have guys trying to cover people all over the field without deep help, you're going to see a fair amount of that from Gary Patterson. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have the same results, but Patterson's very clear. He does not want his guys to focus so much on not getting beat deep that they give up underneath stuff easily. He does not want you to do that. He doesn't teach this. The safeties are not backpedaling to the snap. They are shuffling and waiting till they know what's going on so that they can attack those close routes. They tend not to line every once in a while. One of the safeties will be close to the line of scrimmage, but his guys tend not to line up in the faces of the receivers. There's space, but they're not bailing out at the snap, and they are very quickly reacting up to make plays. So his view is that the lowest percentage pass is the deep ball. Force them to throw it over your heads and try to complete it. They're going to do that sometimes. But this brings up an important point, and that is that if those two safeties are frequently responsible for dealing with say the number 2 receiver on their side on a deep route, and if you're not going to have free safety help because the free safety is either playing robber and is not anywhere deep, or has to pick up the number 2 guy on his side, that means that you need somebody at those positions that can't only be a run enforcer, but you need somebody at those positions who can be trusted to run with a slot receiver downfield without any free safety help. There's a limited number of people who are capable of doing that well, it seems to me. And I don't know who on, I mean, I like Pierce and Urlacher both in just outside of the box playing the run. I think both of those guys are physical guys. And yeah, I know Christian Pierce had a bad tackle attempt in the bowl game. I know I'm going to see it in the comments, but Pierce is generally a pretty physical guy, and I think could play that spot. Urlacher too. Whether they're the guys you can rely on to run with those receivers downfield without deep help, I don't know. And that'll be interesting to see what happens with that. The free safety position, and maybe look, Gary Patterson has in the past played true freshman in his secondary, and he's done it and had guys play well. Is he going to do that this year? I don't know, but you have some guys that have the physical traits he wants, and so we'll talk about some of those guys coming up. That the free safety position is interesting. One of the ways Gary Patterson gets 9 guys in the box frequently is by playing his what he calls cover 2, which means that if on the strong side the number 2 receiver doesn't go vertical, the free safety then is in robber coverage, which he's coming up and he's looking for a throw. He's looking to get underneath that number 1 receiver, maybe the number 2 receiver, but probably the number 1 receiver, and get a pick. Or it also frees him up to be in the box because he no longer has deep responsibilities. He can get up and play the run very quickly. And you'll see some analyses of Gary Patterson's defense where this happens. One of the Texas guys did something, and it was showing TCU against Arkansas, and I actually included that clip in an article I wrote some weeks ago. And you see the free safety is there immediately, and he's making the tackle on the halfback about 2 yards out past the line of scrimmage because he was freed up to get up and attack. But if you're freed up to get an attack, that means that everybody else is on their own behind you. So the free safety is a guy who might have deep responsibility. He's definitely a guy who's playing the lane in run defense, and that means you need a guy. I think you need a guy who's a great athlete and a great tackler. Who is that? I don't know. I mean, you could imagine Alex Graham playing that position and playing it pretty well. He's a big kid. He's physical. He's certainly athletic. But I don't know. What do we think about that? Is Alex Graham likely to be at free? Is he going to be at, I mean, he's a guy who can probably play all the spots in that secondary when you think about it.
I think Alex Graham is the guy that to me is the big key because he is everything you said that he is, at least from what I've seen. And I think that he's going to be the ace in the hole to me. I know he's going to play. I suspect he's going to start unless something happens where somebody beats him out. But I think he's a key because wherever they stick him, he's a difference maker.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, look, this is a guy who even before fall practice last year, there was all kinds of chatter about how Alex Graham is a guy who's going to come in and play on day 1. And then he earned the starting nickel spot, it appeared, in camp before getting hurt. So, yeah, I mean, this is a guy who's going to be on the field somewhere, I think. Is free safety the spot? One of the other safeties, corner? What do you think, Mark? You're muted.
Mark has been muted.
Mark is muted. I didn't
Sorry
do it.
about that. There we
If
go.
I knew how to do that, I'd do it all the time.
I know, I trust you on that one.
I think D Reddick is probably a name that jumps up as a with the possibility of playing that spot. Look, I think Alex is going to play closer to the line of scrimmage. I think he's going to be that strong or that nickel because of that interchangeability, and that's the position that Gary Patterson focuses his defense around. It starts there, and then everything else kind of from around that position. Um, is Isaiah Rubin a guy who's ready to step up? Marquise Gallegos is another name we haven't mentioned yet. There's a lot of talent. It's all young. It hasn't been used. So, does Gary Patterson, want to start using the guys he sees and not what's on film? We don't know how he's going to use any of these guys because last year it was a pretty small rotation. So he's got a bunch of dudes to practice with, and we'll see how he rearranges the deck chairs.
Eric?
Yeah, I look, Graham, he's always going to get that corner safety more, more and put him in coverage and that sort of thing. And I totally get that. I think his tackling is phenomenal. Like I want him around the ball as much as possible. Like he tackles like a safety and I that's what stood out to me. Like we saw him for two. It sounds silly, right? The hype about Alex Graham, like we talked about him all year. When's he going to play? When's he going to play? He at that point he'd had like half a snap. I mean, not nothing. But then he plays in the last two games, leads USC in tackles in both games, is around the ball constantly, and it again, it sounds crazy, but like that's where I'd start. Where can we get this guy around the ball the most? And where whatever that spot seems to be, I'd almost start building from there. I know Christian Pierce is coming back his senior year. Like he's a big get. He's gonna be a vocal leader. Like they're gonna, build around him as well. But man, Alex Graham in those two showings for significant time that he put together, he's one of those guys that I want to see on the field as much as possible this year.
Yeah, and that was as a true freshman who had been hurt for an extensive period of time and just gets thrown in at the end. I'm with you. If he makes the jump you ordinarily see from a first year player to a second year player, then I think Alex Graham's gonna be pretty good this year. And he is the sort of guy you can build your safety group around. I think if they'll do that. Are there any other young guys we should be talking about when it comes to these three safety spots?
It'd be interesting to see from that freshman group. And I'm thinking about Albert Hill, who came in from Ohio with really quite a fanfare. And I think that, they could look at him as a cornerback, but I think when they see how he is, the way he plays, I'm not so sure that he couldn't be a position change if they want to try it just to do what you do in spring ball, check out different areas. So he's somebody that I personally would be looking at to see, is there going to be any chance that he could end up in the safety positions? Because I know that Patterson really puts a lot of emphasis on those two players, the strong and weak safety. And it's kind of like he goes reverse in the way he looks at things. Not the front four isn't important because it really is, and he knows that for sure. But the way he runs his defense, he's going to put guys that can really make a difference in those spots.
Yeah, Hill will be. I was hoping we'd talk about Hill a little bit when we get to the corner position because he's a guy I think might play early. Are there any other guys at the safety spots that we should keep an eye on in spring practice? To the extent we can see anything in spring practice to see whether they're likely to make a move.
I mean, Mark mentioned Gallegos and Isaiah Rubin, right? Those are two guys coming back. I think it's always interesting. Those guys, right? Special guys who carved out special teams roles, guys are workers, all of that sort of stuff. When a new coach comes in, that's sort of the launch pad for them, right? Like they can make a run now without someone saying, "Well, I know that you've done this in your past," right? Like you're going to get fresh eyes on them, so they become interesting.
Let me ask you
Yeah.
this. I mean, Chris, you brought up the freshmen that are coming in. Are two guys, can a Brandon Lockhart or a Madden Reardon, can they, catch the attention of Gary Patterson, say, hey, you're a true freshman, but you know how to play football. You're smart. Can you show me what you can do?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, one of the nice things about Patterson's system is that it can be confusing to the offense, but it's relatively simple for the defense because your responsibilities are not hard to grasp. But you do have to be able to make decisions under pressure, right? I mean, you're deciding whether to be in man or whether to be in a deep half, for example, a corner a lot of the time. And that's going to depend on whether that guy gets vertical, which means you're making the decision after the snap. At free safety, you're talking about a guy who has to, well, both free and the weak safety, you're talking about a guy who has to make the calls for his side of the field. And those calls, as Greg pointed out, might change if you have motion right before the snap. So I don't think that his defense is overly complicated, but I wonder whether you're likely to have young guys play early when you require that much from them mentally. I don't know the answer to that, but it'll be interesting to see. When you transition to corner, the corner position isn't that complicated in this defense. Um, there are times when the corner has the flats. There are a lot of times when the corner has the number one receiver to his side if he goes deep. Now, what that means is that guys like Hill and R.J. Sermons, who can really run and are young, maybe guys you can trust to play that spot, right? Because you're not expecting them to do a lot. You're expecting them to make a decision whether or not they have that guy in man. And really all they have to figure out is he coming 8 yards towards me? If so, then I do. But at the corner spot, you also have a couple of returning starters, Marcellus Williams, who played a lot last year, a lot. Prophet Brown, who was going to play a lot until he was hurt. He's probably going to play at corner, at nickel. But I think Prophet Brown is more of a corner than a safety if you had to choose between the two, sort of body type and skills. So let's open up the floor. What do we think is likely to happen at corner with those four guys? And then we can throw in some of the other younger guys if you want. Who wants to start?
I mean, corner doesn't start with any of those guys, right? It starts with the guys who have played other places.
Yeah, no, I assume that
That's
if
where it
Williams
starts.
is healthy, he's the number one corner on the team and maybe the number one corner in the Big Ten, right? If he's healthy.
Yes. So
He's
he
not
gets back,
playing
and then
spring
and then
ball.
Chasen Johnson, I think, is a guy that you. Chasen Johnson was Alex Graham-ish, that type of thing, right? And as soon as he's good to go, then that's his spot.
Yeah.
And he was just never good to go. Like slowly kind of pitch counted, and then all of a sudden he's out for the year. But those are the two guys that are going to be like if the coaches right now had to sit down and just take a guess, not seeing any spring ball or anything like that, and just roll your starting lineup out there for the first game if everyone's healthy, I I'd bet quite a bit that it's those two guys out there first at corner.
Williams won't be playing in the spring, but he absolutely, come September, if he's healthy, he's the number one guy, right? You're talking about a guy who has a ton of experience, very, very good, very proven. If he's healthy, he's probably going to be a first or second round NFL draft pick. So that guy's a lock. All right, so let's look then look at the other spot because you have Marcellus Williams who played a lot last year, right? They invested a lot of snaps in Marcellus Williams. They also protected him a lot. Marcellus was not a guy who was expected to do much other than play off. Don't let anybody get behind you and try to make a tackle. Right? That's really what they expected from him, and I get that from a young guy. That's not what Gary Patterson's going to expect. And so, if you're Marcellus Williams, you have the benefit of having more experience than any of those other guys, including Chasen Johnson, who started some games. But boy, if I'm looking at those names behind me, I'm looking at Chasen Johnson, Prophet Brown, Elbert Hill, R.J. Sermons, all trying to take my spot. And in a defense that is going to value the ability to play aggressive, tight man coverage, often without safety help. Guys, Marcellus Williams is a talented kid. He will probably make another jump this offseason. But I don't know that that's the skill set I've seen from him so far. If I were Marcellus Williams, I might be hearing footsteps. Am I wrong on that?
No.
No, no, it's true. Yeah, I mean, he's gonna be in that returning starter list, right? But I don't know that you just sit here and say, yeah, he's locked in at one of the corner spots. Like you could see last year, I mean that the confidence level of the entire corner room to start the season was not where you wanted it to be. And you could see it grow as it went along. But you're right, they never really just said that's you. Like you're on your own. We need you to make every single play over there. There was help all the time and just not asked to get in that receiver's pocket, follow him everywhere and win, like win the game against a good receiver. So yeah, it's probably going to be a different ask and it's again, you're talking about Justin Williams all the way healthy when he gets there. It feels like a different room this year in terms of who's ready to go. Because you just once Braylon Conley, like once it was pretty clear, like not ready, your options last year were extremely limited. I think you're going to have more guys that you can roll out there this year.
I think something we should, remind ourselves about also is, Chris, you kind of, diagram this at the beginning of the show, the way Gary Patterson wants his quarterbacks lined up. So they're not going to be lined up in no man's land anymore. Does that just help their skill set? Marcellus is kind of a physical guy. He was a little handsy. That might play to his strengths, using Gary Patterson's philosophy, lining up and not letting guys get behind you.
Yeah. And most of the time, Patterson's not going to have his corners in the face of the opposing number one receiver, largely because it's harder to disguise your coverage when you're doing that, right? If you're in his face, you're almost certainly in man. Maybe you're playing a two deep zone, but you're probably going to be a man. And as soon as they go in motion, we know that. But what Patterson does ask actually is pretty difficult for a corner, because what he asks you to do is play off most of the time, say 8 yards off, 2 yards inside. And that 2 yards inside is really important. If we talked about this last year after the Illinois game, and we talked about the importance of leverage in the secondary and how USC's young players did not seem to understand leverage and were getting beat inside routinely as a result, and it was grit. And so, look, RJ Sermons is a guy who is immensely talented, and his dad, obviously a USC football player. He probably understands the game. Elbert Hill is probably a guy who understands the game. But if you're as talented as those guys are in high school, you don't necessarily have to have the cleanest technique in order to cover the guys you're going up against. If you're RJ Sermons, you almost never see a guy that has your athletic ability, maybe until the Army All-American game, and maybe not then. You're talking about a guy who, who's competing for a 100-meter title and has some length to him, right? He's freakish. The problem you have if you're a corner in Patterson's defense is that you are frequently going to be matched up with the outside wide receiver and without safety help. The reason you have that leverage inside is because the hardest route to defend is that post route. If you have a guy that can really run and you're playing off coverage, defending that post is really difficult. Now, if you're Elbert Hill or RJ Sermons and you can fly, it helps, right? Because even if that guy is fast and you lose your leverage, you can still chase him and keep up. But it's extraordinarily difficult to play that spot. And so I think it requires, and I hate this, as a guy who was short and slow, who played corner, I hate to say this, I think it requires a guy with really special physical gifts, because you're going to have to be able to run with guys. And if you're playing the Oregons and the Ohio States and of the world, you're going to have guys on the other side who can really go, and you're going to be able to run with them, and you're not going to have anybody to help you if that free safety's in route. So My guess, guys, I think Eric's right. I think it's Williams and Chase and Johnson, but it would not surprise me if the next guy off the bench is Sermons or Hill, just because of the physical gifts they have and how simple yet how difficult to play I think Patterson's defense is. That's just my thoughts on it. Mark,
And I
you were
don't want
wanting to
to
say.
so I don't want to say like sorry Marcellus Williams, like you're done, you're
No,
out. Like there's a group of guys just from the roster build. There's a group of guys last year that got asked to play and do more than they should have been asked at that point in their career, right? Telling redshirt freshmen, like, it's you, you're on it. We got to just keep throwing you out there. They can play. Like, there's redshirt freshmen that are good out there, but not all of them. Some of them need a little bit of time, and sometimes you're asking guys to do too much. I think at linebacker, we saw that with a couple sophomore, but redshirt freshman in terms of playing time on defense, and what those snaps do, and the confidence you gain from it going to the next year. I think that's one of the unknowns about quite a few guys on this roster, and will be interesting to see kind of how that plays going into this season.
those game snaps are irreplaceable, really, because the first time a young guy gets thrown out there in a real game, it doesn't feel like practice. It moves faster. There's a lot of pressure, and mental errors start to pop up. And you saw that with the young guys last year in the secondary early on. Marcellus Williams is going to get a chance to play, and Marcellus Williams did some good things last year. It may be that Marcellus is able to step up and play that position the way Gary Patterson wants it to be played. I hope so, because if so, you have an experience. You'll have, you know, two, and frankly, with Jason Johnson, three guys that have some real experience playing at those spots. That's not a bad thing at all. But we'll see. Mark, I thought you were trying to say something and didn't get a chance. You still want to jump in? Okay, let's move closer to the line of scrimmage. Let's talk about the linebacker spot. And guys, I've been critical of the returning linebackers. I don't apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize today. But what I will say is that according to Scott Schrader and his sources inside USC, I am not on the same page as Lincoln Riley and Gary Patterson when it comes to the linebacker room. They think there's a ton of talent there, and that these guys can be very, very good next year. And I so hope they're right. But one of the great mysteries, to me at least, is what the hell are they looking at to suggest that our linebackers are on the verge of stardom? Because I don't see it. So let's just start there. And I know that we don't have public statements from the coaches. Well, we have some, but we don't. Look, I don't trust the public statements from the coaches about how good the defensive player is going to be anymore. Not after last year. But I do trust that they really believe these guys can do it this year, because if they didn't believe that, they would have done more in the transfer portal, right? They must have. So, Mark, let's start with you. Why do we think the coaches are this confident about the linebacker room that they've put together?
Do they have a choice?
Well, maybe. Well, I mean, they have a choice whether to be confident or not, I guess.
I'm with you right now. I'm in the camp of I don't want to hear it anymore. I want to see it more. So if Gary Patterson's defense is predicated on speed, Desmond Stevens, Jaden Walker, they bring that. They've got that skill set. Maybe that's what they're going to build around. I'm not saying these guys aren't good players, but we all watched the linebacker play last year. Maybe they just need a little bit of that jump start with Mike Eckler, kind of, kicking them in the butt, playing with that hair on fire mentality. You're bringing in, Talanoa Ely. He's supposed to be one of the guys that you can probably play early. It's going to be interesting to watch. Last year going into spring and after spring, the defensive line was going to be great. I mean, it was going to be elite. I mean, we heard every description word you can use. They're talented. We'll see. I'm not drinking a big gulp of Kool-Aid this year. I've got to see it.
That's the thing. They're talented. You see them run around, right? It's big former safeties playing linebacker that can
Right.
move. Every time these guys were asked to do something out in space, it's impressive. It's impressive. The nuances of the linebacker position, playing in the box, getting through traffic, seeing it now, seeing it before it happens, and going. That's what makes great linebackers. But if you consider yourself a great coach, that's the part of it. I'll coach you. I'll coach you to do that. If you can run fast, if you hit hard, if you do all this stuff, I'll coach you to get there. It didn't, right? It did. We didn't see that part of it develop. I think as much and as much as we would have wanted it to where you're playing really good defense against good offenses. And Lincoln Riley talks about, we saw big steps from the linebackers throughout the year, and again, they're breaking film down and have access to stuff that we're not watching. Like, we see the results and some of the stuff and all that. But so that's where I think it's coming from. It's, I see these guys move and I see right, they talk about the flashes. Like, the flashes don't make the player. They give you a little bit of a look into, like, boy, if we could get that consistently, that's a great player. I think that I can get that as a coach. But the flash, when it doesn't get backed up by that consistently, is almost more frustrating than anything else, because it's like, oh my gosh, that play, that and Jaden Walker and Desmond Stevens both had him where you go, that's an unbelievable play. That's an unbelievable play from that kid. And can we get it over and over and over? So I don't sit here and say they're wrong for thinking that. I think that it's, at this point, you sort of slow play yeah, he's an all conference guy and we can get that out of him until it's game 7 and he's got 95 tackles. And it's like, yeah, this is what we saw in this kid, during spring or winter.
Well, Eric Gentry was an all-conference guy, but that didn't really pan out. I mean, so I don't know. Again,
So Gentry's thing, I still think
and he
was
was healthy
you had
last
two
year.
inside
And he was
You
healthy.
had two inside like the flash that we got from him is when you had two super veteran inside linebackers that you could play and then work him off of that in this position where he could line up here one time, he could be there one time, he's coming off the edge, he's doing all this sort of stuff. I think the step back, it's a little bit like what we saw from Kamari Ramsey too. Once you stick him, he's going to be here every single time. Then he's easier to game plan against, and then you can start to eliminate him because it's not something where, oh, where'd he come from? We can do so much with him, and I think that was a big part of his step back when you're just looking at like the stats that he put up and the impact plays, because he still had a few games last year where he was tremendous too.
Greg, I know how you feel about unproven talent or untapped potential. But here's the thing. If you're Gary Patterson and you watch Walker and Stevens, and let's not forget about Elijah Newby, who is 230 pounds and runs like a track star. If I watch that guy run around on the field, I'm going to say, holy smokes, I got some dudes here. The question is, why were the linebackers unable to read the run game and fill the gaps last year? One possible explanation is because Dan Lynn was expecting too much from them and Rob Ryan wasn't coaching them very well. Because if we want to go along with that theory, Eric Gentry also, despite having, I thought, excellent football instincts, also seemed to stand around a lot and catching blocks a lot, which tells me that despite all the kind things that Lincoln Riley said about last year's defensive staff, maybe we had a defensive staff problem, and that's why we didn't stop the freaking run game ever. Maybe. The question, Greg, if you're Gary Patterson, do you feel comfortable that you can teach these linebackers that when you see that down block, you go? You don't stand there, you don't wait, you go. Can he teach them to play that way? Because if he doesn't, you're not beating Oregon, and you're not beating Ohio State, and you're not beating Washington, and you're not beating Penn State, and you're not beating anybody who's even halfway decent offensively. So, Greg, Is this something that he's likely to be able to do?
Yes, I think he is. And I think those players that you mentioned, uh, and also Talanoa Ely, who I have a lot of excitement for, to be honest with you.
Who the coaches apparently love.
I think he's tremendous. He checks all the boxes for me, but
And the kid from Washington, we shouldn't leave him out. They brought him into play.
yeah,
So
and
yeah.
he's good against the run. Here's the thing. What I learned in my years of coaching and stuff, no matter what sport it was, to be honest with you, is that systems make a big difference in some players. You had me thinking about the old 4-4 defense, right? In the early days, people would say, "Oh, you can't run; it's a 4-4 defense," and people weren't sure. They go, "Oh, 4-4 defense. Well, throw on them because there'll be a three deep secondary, right?" Uh, but to me, the system is going to dictate and take advantage of these players. And I think using an example of one that's gotten a lot of attention, uh, Desmond Stevens. I think that Desmond Stevens is going to be really, really improved because they're going to tell him this is what we want you to do, and he's going to know exactly what to do. And the way I look at it is, Eckler coming in at linebacker coach is really, really important. He is really good. I've seen him firsthand on the field coaching. He's going to administer. This is the way it's going to be done. He's high intensity. He's gonna administer that to that group of linebackers, no matter whether they're inside or outside. Because let's face it, even if you're coaching a particular unit or specifically outside as opposed to inside, whatever you want, that personality is going to infect everybody. And my feeling is I think that of all the positions on defense, I think linebacker is going to be the biggest improvement we're going to see. Because if you don't do what you're asked to do, you're not going to play. Because I think that Patterson is old school. Eckler won't stand for it. And I sense that these players are good enough mentally and good enough physically that when they play in this system, it's going to bring out the best in them. I'm excited to see it. I don't need to wait for Ohio State to see how it goes. For me, I'll have a pretty good idea watching the first couple of games to see how they respond to it, and then when they play teams that are really loaded with talent, uh, we'll see how they react to it. But they're going to know what to do. I don't think there's going to be any doubt about it, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and look, these are talented guys. Desmond Stevens, especially. His first year when he got that pick, I think it was against Nebraska, and he ran it back. And you thought that guy runs like a running back.
Penn
Holy
State, yeah.
smokes, Penn State, right? The athletic ability he has. He's plenty big. He can run. He was pretty good in pass coverage, pretty consistently because of his athleticism. This is a guy if he can understand what he's supposed to be doing could be very, very good. I don't think he understood what he was supposed to be doing last year. And the other thing I would say is, I'm not convinced that Dan Lynn didn't bring an NFL approach to defending the run into to USC. I know there is a theory in the NFL shared by a lot of coaches that the key to winning football games is to stop big plays. If you stop big plays, you win. And that's a little bit of a different approach than the traditional view that you have to stop the other team's run and make them one-dimensional, right? I mean, that's the traditional way of looking at it. That's certainly the way Pete Carroll looked at it. We're going to stop their run. If they can't run the ball and they have to throw it, then we're going to be all right. Then we'll dial up some blitzes and I got the impression, with the exception of the Nebraska game, where Denton Lynn clearly was committed to stopping the run, was bringing multiple run blitzes. He didn't look like a guy who was that bothered by those 6-yard gains, right? I mean, he just didn't. When you show up in South Bend and you're playing soft and you're playing against a freshman and two great running backs, it's like, well, that's a weird philosophy. I don't think that's going to be Gary Patterson's philosophy if it was Dan Lynn's, and so maybe we'll see a huge improvement there. One thing that would help our linebackers immensely is if the defensive line plays better. It is harder to play linebacker when you are catching your nose tackle. And that happened a fair amount last year. it is hard to play linebacker when your edges don't play properly against the run, when they don't squeeze the edge and instead come upfield, and now the hole is massive. It's very difficult to play against the run as a linebacker. So let's move up front, guys. We have two defensive line coaches, one new, one who's returning. The one who's returning, Sean New, I've been a little bit critical of because I haven't seen the jump in production from the guys that he has, all of whom are immensely talented. Right? Cameron Crawford should be a superstar. Should be. Anthony Jones was talented. Braylon Shelby was talented. Those guys did not play to their level. Is that a Sean New problem? Don't know. Apparently, Lincoln Riley doesn't think so. And Coach Jones has been promoted from, I guess you'd say, assistant D-line coach to Coach Henney to the main guy inside. Let's start on the edges. What do we expect to see from these edges when it comes to this new Gary Patterson defense? I think we have a pretty good idea who the likely starters are going to be, but also tell me, how quickly do you think Luke Wayful gets in the rotation and what we see from him? Mark, why don't you start with that?
How soon does Luke Wayful get into the rotation? Is that the question?
No. Is it minute one? Is that what you're going to say?
I think you're going to see him playing game one, and I think you're going to see him playing very early. Will he start? Probably not. I think Cam and Braylon have probably done enough to warrant being a starter game one, unless one of them gets hurt. I'm interested to see, does USC have the personnel that Patterson wants to use? Because he likes to run more of a true four down lineman type of set. So do those guys fit that? We know that Jakeem and Floyd Boucard, they're going to be the guys inside primarily. Does the rest of the roster set up the way Gary Patterson likes to run things? They brought in Zariah Fisher during the offseason through the transfer portal, a little bit more support there on the edge. I like where USC is up the middle. I think that might be their strength, even though they're young. You pointed out, can the guys on the outside, we've been saying this for how many years now in a row, get to the quarterback? You can't constantly be close. Cam Crawford, immensely talented. He looked great in that bowl game. He looked like, all right, that's the guy we've been waiting for. Is he going to be able to do it game one all the way through game 12?
Yeah, look, we've seen flashes from Shelby and from Crawford, and both guys are talented. It changes the defense dramatically if you have a guy on the edge that cannot be handled by an offensive tackle, right? If you have that, offenses have to do all kinds of things that they don't want to do, right? They have to leave a tight end in. They have to chip with the running back. They have to get rid of the ball very quickly. They have to roll out, right? They have to do all kinds of things to overcome the fact that you have a guy on the edge they don't know how to block. I don't know if we can expect that sort of jump from Crawford or from Shelby. I don't know if we can expect that from Wayful as a freshman. I don't know if we expect that from Fisher from Penn State in year number 6 or 7 that he's been playing. But maybe Eric McKinney can answer those questions. Eric, are we likely to have an edge rusher who causes problems this year?
I can't say yes. I can't say yes. Here's what I will say. I think that you're gonna have more interior linemen that cause problems for offensive lines that give the edges more of a benefit in rushing situations. So I think that group potentially could make more of an impact. I just don't. I can't sit here right now and say, yep, light's going to come on. Is going to be a 10 sack season for anybody on the edge. You see them climbing. You see them still moving forward. I don't know that necessarily you're going to get, yep, here comes the big jump, and now you're that Penn State slash Ohio State edge guy that offensive coordinators spend all week trying to figure out how do we just keep this guy from wrecking the game. I don't know that you have that in a returning guy right now, but I will say I do think that again, they're going to get a boost from the interior of the line this year that wasn't there last year. Like that's one spot where I feel pretty confident in saying you're gonna get more out of the interior.
Eric, what would be your starting front four? I mean, for me, I'm going to move Jade to outside. I'm going to have Stewart and Boucard in the middle, and I'm going to have Cam Crawford on the other side. That was my question. Does USC have the personnel to fit Gary Patterson's version of the 4-2-5 compared to what Danton Lynn's been running out there?
Yeah, so like how many times can I use Jakeem? Can I only use him once or can I line him up at two spots at the same time?
If we could
Yes.
clone
Moving
him, that'd be
Jade,
amazing.
right, moving Jade to the outside is the same thing that people wanted. Devin Tompkins is a defensive end, he's a defensive end. And I get that, but he was not a pass rushing threat at all at defensive end. Couldn't get there. So it's situational. It's what do you want out of this? Like I think Jade, if he can move outside, I don't know that he's a threat to get to the quarterback from the outside. Is he a better run stopper on the edge at that spot than on the inside? I don't know. I don't know if he's capable of squeezing and playing square to the line and doing all that stuff. It is if he's never done it before, it might be an upgrade over what we've seen at times from the edges because at times that hasn't been anything that anybody's been interested in doing. So though that's a question that I just don't know if he's a run stopper on the edge. But I get the idea, right? His measurables and sometimes getting a little high and all that stuff that we've seen from players that look like Big Ten defensive ends that are asked to play Big Ten defensive tackle and don't make the same plays that other defensive tackles around the conference are making. I understand the idea, like get him out of the middle, put him on the edge. I thought he was, if you want to talk Cam Crawford playing against TCU and turning it up a little bit, Jade had a great game in that bowl game. I mean, he played really well also in that one in the interior. So we've seen him, right? We've seen him sometimes on the edge, sometimes on the inside. If you're gonna be on the edge and you're not gonna be a pass rush threat, you had better be unbelievable against the run. And I don't know that that necessarily just immediately translates if you ask him to do something else. If it does, then yes, great. That'd
I
be
just
great.
don't I just don't know where, how often he'd play inside because we haven't mentioned Alex Van Susten's name yet. We haven't mentioned Jamie Winfield's name yet, who we all agree is going to play this year. So this is why we
I
know that
think
they brought him
so.
up the
So
middle.
I think you've got four. I think you've got four, right? With Jakeem, with Floyd, with Jade, and with Alex Van Sumer, and like those are, I'd roll those out as a top four. And then yeah, as Jamie Winfield gets in, as Tom gets in, those kind of guys. I think the thing that stands out to me about the interior group is when Chad Bowden talked to the media a little while ago, what he specifically said about Tom was he can anchor against double teams, and we see so much duo. We have to have a guy who can do that, and it's one of those things where it's like, okay, that's great. You see that. Like that's really good to know that one of the things that you are truly looking for inside as someone who can anchor against double teams and hold up against duo because that's just USC doesn't run a ton of that. Certainly not as much as they see coming the other way. So to get defensive linemen ready to see as much of that as they're going to see, you need guys who are naturally able to do that. And again, asking someone 100% of the time, you have to win against a double team or at least stalemate against a double team. Like guys are going to get pushed. It's going to happen sometimes. The percentage has to come way down in terms of defensive tackles seeing double teams and just getting wiped out of the play, sideways or pushed back, whatever it was, just wiped out. And so that's where I think, again, when you're talking about today, like can you do that? And if you can, great. And if not, get someone who can.
Yeah, and I think that explains in part the Michigan State transfer. You don't pick up a guy like that because you think he's going to be a great pass rusher. He's going to make plays sideline to sideline. You put him in there because you think he's tough and he can take on double teams and occupy both blockers so that your linebacker can make a play. And Tom may be the same kind of player, although I think he has more upside athletically. Jamie Winfield is a guy. Jamie Winfield is a guy who's ready to play on day one. I don't know if technique-wise he's ready, but he is big enough and he is quick enough that he will pose problems immediately for offensive linemen. He's going to play. And I'm going to make a prediction. I think Luke Wafel is going to be starting by game 3. And I think that because, number one, if you look at the best true freshman edge rushers in the country, those guys always hanging around 6, 7, 8 sacks, which would be a big number for USC over the last 10 years. I think Wafel can deliver that. Number two, he is a big edge. Crawford and Shelby are big guys. They are not big for an edge in a four-man front defense. Wafel, I think, will come in at 265, 270. So I think he probably starts and plays very well. One of the things we have to look for is not just the pass rush numbers, too. Again, we talked about this a second ago, but let me explain something in case you don't understand it. When you talk about edge containment, that doesn't mean that you just make the guy go inside of you, right? That's not what contain means. What it means, especially in the scheme we're going to see this year, it means that you are getting your hands on the guy that's shaded inside of you, and you are squeezing inside and keeping your shoulders square. And then when that guy finally releases, because you're not going to be able to hold him there forever, you are very quickly looking for the H-back, or, in the old days, the fullback, or a pulling guard, and you are meeting him not 3-4 yards outside of the tackle. You are meeting him where the guard used to be, and you're creating a gigantic mess, and you're bouncing things outside. That's what it means. That is not what USC's edges did last year. What they did is they came upfield, pretended that they didn't have run responsibilities. The running back cut inside of them through a gigantic hole and then cut outside. I expect that to stop on day one with Gary Patterson. He is not going to tolerate that, and he shouldn't. You cannot play the run that way. You cannot. And so as much as I beat up on the linebackers, and with cause, if you watch the film, it wasn't just indecisive linebackers or linebackers taking false steps and then they can't get back into the play, although you saw a bunch of that. It was also defensive tackles getting pushed backwards by double teams. It was also edges who didn't have a clue what they were supposed to be doing against the run. I think that changes on day one. I think Crawford and Shelby look very different against a run this year than they did last year. And if they don't, then I can virtually guarantee that Luke Wafel will be starting, because he will be starting in practice number 2. That's just the way it is. You have to stop the run. Greg?
Well, to me, the key is Wafel. The reason is I've seen enough of him on film. I've seen enough of him in some of the All-Star game. This is a guy that comes back to a Pete Carroll type of player, Brian Cushing. He plays with 100, I hate to use the term, but 110%. And he is physical. He's quick enough in that area. He's able to track down guys from behind. He's an NFL player. I mean, that's just what it is. I kind of laughed because I was agreeing with you in your positive assessment that he could be starting by the third game. And maybe he will start by the third game, but I certainly won't be shocked at all from my perspective if he's starting by the time they play Ohio State. That I can guarantee you. This guy comes to rumble. This is, let's get ready to rumble. He's a player I could watch all the time because I know that he doesn't take a playoff. Part of the thing that I liked in hearing him talk is just how mature he is. How he reminds me of a player from out here that would have played in the Trinity League for a modern day, or for Santa Margarita. I mean, this guy, he's a man, and the way he plays with his brains, this kid, if Crawford isn't ready to go, uh, he better be ready to go. Otherwise, he'll be going in off after the first series of plays have taken place.
And it's a less complicated spot to play, right? But playing
Exactly.
Talanoa Ely playing on the inside at linebacker, that is a tough assignment. I'm not saying he can't do it, but it's hard. There's so much that he has to keep track of in terms of getting people lined up in front of him, in terms of reading the play. Edge is much simpler. And yeah, you need to know scheme, you need to know some technique things, but it's easier. It's easier than jumping in and trying to play free safety or inside linebacker or corner. It's easier. So I don't think it's going to be hard for him to step in and play, but we'll see. Maybe this is just wishful thinking. This is the season for that. Okay, that's it. We covered the defense. We're going to cover the offense next week. Let's close with this. We had a suggestion on the message board that the four of us, over the course of some weeks, pick our all-time USC teams. We'll do a couple of positions a show. And at some point during this offseason, we will have complete rosters, 11 men on defense, 11 men on offense for all four of us. We'll put those up on the board, and then we can have people make fun of us for how stupid our picks were. We're going to start today with the easiest position to pick because we only need four, and USC has four Heisman Trophy winners and some other big names at the position. If anybody can't pick a quarterback today, then you're just going to get kicked off the show. That's it. If you can't pick a quarterback because you need more time to research, you're in trouble. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with Greg. He's going to go first, at least for the first pick, and then he'll go last on the next pick. We're just going to do a circle, and we're going to try to put together the best teams possible. Greg Katz, who is your all-time USC quarterback for your team?
Under reasonable circumstances, you would say, well, Matt Leinart. But I'm not going to pick Leinart. Not because I don't think he accomplished a lot, but I really think given the situation that this quarterback was put in, I'm going with Carson Palmer. I think he was just that good, and he didn't play on teams like the ones that Leinart played on. His team was good. Carson Palmer's team was good. But if Palmer had the same chance of 3 years starting under Norm Chow, oh my goodness! I mean, he had a really good NFL quarterback career, and I understand why. So he's my pick.
All right, I'm going to put sophomore year Carson Palmer down for Greg and Mark Holken. Who's your quarterback pick?
Well, since Carson Palmer's off the board, what I would say to Greg's point is imagine Carson Palmer with Lincoln Riley for 3 years, what he would have been capable of doing. So since I don't get to have Carson as the starter, Caleb Williams, I mean, is that a bad choice, Chris?
It does not strike me as a bad choice, Mark. I think that is a legitimate pick. A Heisman Trophy winner and an NFL starter who made it to NFC Championship game. All right, Eric McKinney. I can guess who's coming, but I'm not going to. I'm going to let you pick it, and you only get one. Don't name six.
Yeah, Leinart's good. Leinart's good for me as the third pick, like one of the top, what, two, three quarterbacks of all time. Sounds good.
I'm going to go with an underdog pick because I love the man and I loved his teams. I'm going to go with Rodney Peete. Rodney Peete is my quarterback. So Palmer, Williams, Leinart, and Rodney Peete. Now we're going to turn it over to the other side of the ball. Safety. Mark Holken, you go first for safety.
This is probably the low-hanging fruit, but I'm going to go with Troy Polamalu.
Troy Polamalu. And you don't have to ask me, but that also is not a bad pick. I agree with that. Eric McKinney, who's your first safety choice?
You're not going to slide yourself in there to take Ron. That's fine. I'll like I had to
I
settle
want
for Matt
to.
Leinart. I'll settle for Ronnie Lott. I guess.
The greatest of all time to McKinney. Okay, so it's my pick. I'm going to go with a teammate of Rodney Pete's. I'm going to go with Mark Carrier at safety. Greg Katz, who's your safety?
Oh, yeah. You guys all took all the good ones.
We did not take all
Congratulations.
the good ones. Our
Not even
All-Americans
close.
still on the board.
Boy.
You need help? I got one for you, Greg.
No,
All right, throw it out there and see if I agree
actually.
with you.
What's that?
No,
Wait,
go ahead.
you can't name a fourth
Yeah,
safety that played at USC?
go ahead.
Ooh, don't talk that way to Mark. Come on, Mark. Who
No,
is it?
Oh,
you.
and
It's
Mark,
your
You.
pick. You get.
you were going to give him some options, like maybe a Tim McDonald, maybe a Dennis Smith. Go ahead, give him some options. Let him pick
I
one.
was actually I did like Dennis Smith. I will
I
say
don't want you to play with 10 guys, Greg. Okay, you're going to go with Dennis Smith. All right. That's a legitimate pick, Dennis Smith, which means that Tim McDonald's still on the board for some later time. Okay, good. Well, we've started. We've started. We're going to pick again next week. We're going to do this every week until we have full rosters. And then we are literally going to have all these guys show up for a fundraiser and play each other. I've already worked it out with all of them, except for Rodney Pete. Rodney Pete hasn't committed yet. Guys, is there anything else we should talk about before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think
Commitment
there is
today.
one thing.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it just came down the pipe.
Commitment today from a Tuck USC Legacies of Vandermaid is on his way to USC. Isaiah Vandermaid from Santa Margarita Catholic. Lenny, right? Former USC offensive lineman, Isaiah defensive lineman. Building that 27 class, not going to be a ton of guys in it, but again, you love when USC creates space for these guys, right? Like
I'm a
that. That's
Trojan. His coach in high school was a Trojan, and a guy who played really well in that playoff run that they just had. So
You
we'll
know,
see. I think he's listed about 270 now. I think you'd have to expect that he's going to be somewhere in the 290, 300 range by the time he is a true freshman at college. But I guess we'll see. Okay, good. Good news. It's nice to
you know
close
what?
this.
I did want to bring up one thing just to I was
Please.
curious about. What do you think of the Big Ten saying that they want to have a 24 team playoff? I thought it was ridiculous.
not enough. 48. That's when I'll start listening.
What if we get the Notre Dame series back? Is that good enough? Is that a fair trade-off?
I think
I,
you know what? If they do away with that, if SC could get Notre Dame back, I would be happy because I think that I come through that era where we play everybody, and my feeling is with the way things are, you know, who knows what goes on in the back room with so much stuff when they start talking about this, that, and the other thing when it comes to who we're going to play and playoffs and that sort of stuff. But my feeling is get rid of the conference championship games and
that is part of their proposal, at least.
yeah, that I can agree with. I understand that because if they're worried about, maybe a sixth place team getting in there, I basketball is different. Football to me is like, let's just bring in the head spotlight teams. And my thing is just take the champion. You want to pick in a large team, fine. But we don't need a conference championship game.
So if you're gonna take 24 and you're not gonna have a conference championship game, what are the conferences doing? What like why why have the conferences at that point? I mean play, right? Get the big group of teams, set your schedule between that group, and there's your conference is you play your way into the final 24. Like I don't know. It just feels like flailing to flail right now without any sort of plan or goal of this is going to be the best way to do this. Here's how we get there. Here's how we carry this out. It's just from day to day, hey, let's try something. Let's try something else.
Who's in charge of college football, Eric? There's your answer.
Chris is. That's what I'm asking him.
So Chris is, isn't Chris? I thought Chris was a
24 is
commissioner.
way too
Commissioner
many.
Arledge, fix it.
That's right. Oh, what a
I'd take
beautiful
that
sound,
job.
isn't
Well,
it?
it depends on the pay, but I probably would take that job. Look, 24 is way too many. But what you're seeing now is in the days when there was a two-team, when the two top teams played for the national title, it was only two. You could finish in the top 3 or 4. I mean, Pete Carroll did it a bunch of years, and still everybody legitimately says, okay, that's an elite program. Like USC fans, it's crazy to think about now. They complained because it got so boring beating the crap out of a different Big Ten team in the Rose Bowl every single year. We got bored of it and we didn't like it anymore. This is no fun. It'd be fun to go. It'd be fun to finish in the top 5 every year now, it seems to me. But you have a lot of coaches now that you go to 12 team playoff. If you don't make the 12-team playoff, you didn't have a successful season at USC or Ohio State or Michigan. You just didn't. If you can't make a top 12 playoff, you had a bad season. And so you have a lot of coaches who say, well, if not making the playoff means that we're a failure, we better get as many teams in the playoff as possible. And I think that's what's motivating this. And I think 24 is late.
Yeah, 8-4 in the playoffs.
No way.
The NFL does it, right? They do the equivalent of that because you do have, you can be 8-9 and make the playoffs, but that's stupid there too. And so I don't know. I don't like their proposal. I think 12 is already plenty. The problem with 12 is they let 2 teams in that had no business being there. Right? It doesn't make any sense.
It should be 16 teams and no buys.
And nobody that's not from a major conference. There's no reason to have Tulane in that playoff. I mean, I guess I understand if you want their buy-in or if you need their vote, then you do what you have to do. But so it makes no sense. Have the best 12 or 16 teams in, have no buys, have as many home games as possible for the higher seeded teams, and make it where independents can't get in. That way Notre Dame actually has to join a conference instead of rigging their schedule, those sissies.
Should we start a pool when USC will announce their 12th game this year? I mean, we're literally.
I still think
we're going to the end.
I
of
still
February.
think you treat this. Yeah, I think they should treat it like the Royal Rumble, where everyone's at the game, you don't know who they're playing, then all of a sudden a fight song comes on, that team runs out of the tunnel, that's when you find out.
Oh,
That
cool.
At this point, let's do that.
I think it's going to be Sacramento State.
It's going to be somebody we don't like. Mark, you tripped me on the message board when you said USC is going to play Clemson. I thought, no way. They actually found a way to get a real opponent. And then I read your post and saw that, no, that's not what's going on. It's going to be somebody we don't want to play. And look,
I think I think it's someone from out here, right? It's Mountain West is a team that plays Hawaii. It's like it's gonna be one of those teams, a San Jose State, a Fresno State twice. Like, why not? Some of these teams play, Oregon State, Washington State, they play each other twice. That sounds good.
Yeah, it doesn't. But it's going to be a team that we don't want to play. I don't understand. Look, if you go to a 24 team playoff, why are you playing 12 games? Now, don't get rid just of the conference title game. There's no reason to play 3 crappy teams. And if you have a 24 team playoff, have one warm-up game against somebody, or just make it where everybody has to schedule somebody from a Power 4 conference. Why not? I mean, all NFL teams have to play NFL teams. They don't get to go play a semi-pro team in their preseason 3 times. It's stupid. Okay, I guess we're done, guys. So, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Until then, fight on, everybody.